Alright, with Gold Rush ending and no new Yu-Gi-Oh anime in sight that is even Rush Duels, I think it's a good proper time to start doing this where I give out my personal top 5 favorite Yu-Gi-Oh Rush Duel decks based on their design and playstyle on my personal opinion. Because Rush Duels as a concept has some cool concepts definitely, and card design wise I kinda like them, and a bit of a mixed bag on its gameplay style. But when it comes to some of the decks, definitely some awesome concepts. In fact, some of these I wish they actually bring into TCG, or even just parody it in a way, like Rush Duel has been doing, and in a way I kinda wish they also bring Maximum Summon in the TCG, or OCG if you want to do that as well. But anyway, with all that out of the way, let's just begin my top 5 rankings, based on my personal opinion, and you can always have your own favorite rankings as well. So on the bottom of my list, which is could be number 5, it's could be the Dark Matter. Now I really love Dark Matter's archetype design, just the dark galaxy aesthetic, especially of the idea of matter being the opposite of the galaxy, with their main boss monster being the dragon, and their main important monsters will be Contact Dark Matter monsters, which is actually the deck that also introduces Contact Fusion, which I have to say the Dark Matter Contact Fusions are all awesome. We go from a galaxy dragon to an emperor dragon, furthering evolving it, which is awesome, and we also got a surprise fusion with Transom, making once again Transom work with another deck in a way. Now the only reason why that this deck is ranked so low in number 5, despite being one of my favorite design ones and playstyle, is that after the Transom, there was practically no more Dark Matter. I really wish that we got more support for these, especially since the character was still active but swapped back to her original deck, so it is a bit unfortunate. But nonetheless, it's still one of my favorite Rush Duel decks for its awesome design and the archetype that introduced Contact Fusion in Rush Duels. And into the number 4 spot, we got Omtiverse. Basically a multiverse deck version of the Galactica, with its main ace being its own version of Oblivion, which is a flaming one, which actually looks pretty awesome, and it has its own Eternal Galactica being Endless Doom Oblivion. It even has its own Maximum monster, Wish of Altiverse, and also has its own Ritual monster, the only other one at the moment in Rush Duels, being Majesty of Altiverse. A lot of different cool aces, but in my opinion not as cool as Dark Matter, but what makes it better than Dark Matter in my opinion is not only for its summoning methods, but also its playstyle, which focuses on changing your type to Galaxy, while also manipulating your opponent's type, which I actually found it a little interesting because not many decks in Yu-Gi-Oh actually do this where it focuses on changing types. But not only that, it has every summoning method in Rush Duel available, if you do not count Contact Fusion. But the only thing that sets it back a little bit compared to the remaining of the list is really just the design. In my opinion, the design is just okay, but it really doesn't really look multiversal to me. In number 3 on my list, it's Prime. Design-wise, it's actually based off every other main character, which already made me found this archetype a little interesting because this is one of the rare archetypes that actually bases its cards based off other characters. Its main ace is a Transom, which is supposed to represent the polar opposite of Udius here, and having Transom means that you also technically have access to the Ritual because Transom actually synergizes with the deck as well. But what makes this deck a little more unique is that it has something called Prime Tribute Summon. Basically, you're going to be tributing monsters with less materials than needed, or in some cases more, like Transom, and is still technically currently the only Rush Duel deck that actually makes unique tribute summon. And as for the Transom, well, it evolved into Full Armor Nova by using another Transom of the polar opposite galaxy to become one, which is definitely awesome. And hence why it's on my number 3, because it makes unique design based off other characters in the anime and turns it into a deck, which is actually really rare in Yu-Gi-Oh! While also making a unique way with the tribute summon mechanic. And into number 2, it's Void Verger. Design-wise, definitely awesome with the Dark Galaxy Dragons, and its Ogre monsters, which is also awesome. The main ace being Requiem, and playstyle-wise, it just actually mostly focuses on destruction, and definitely has a lot of its own fusion monsters, like the Evolved Requiem fused with its other alternate ace being Geo Machina, or with a fusion with another character being Chaos Machina. But we could go even further with this by adding the Dark Matter stuff and Contact Fusion, because this is the other deck that has Contact Fusion and it's the main one, which is actually what makes this number 2 on my list as well. Mainly with the Dark Matter Requiem along with the Omega. Now I do wish that this deck also has Maximum Summon, but not everyone can have everything, so this is an oh well. But it does have its awesome design and it's a little bit awesome playstyle of destruction, while also having access to fusion summon along with contact fusion. And it also has its own god monster that never been summoned in the anime, which is actually what makes this to my number 2, because this deck actually has a little more unique summoning with a awesome design in comparison to the rest of the list. And now before we go to number 1, we go to honorable mentions. So first off, we got 7 Roads. Design wise, not my personal favorite when it comes to any Yu-Gi-Oh archetype, but I do like the elemental road playstyle where it focuses on the different attributes you have. It also has its own girl, which is a reference of course to Dark Magician Girl alongside Dark Magician, which also has its own fusion monsters, which I do find a little awesome, and does fuse with the 7 Road Magician to make a Master of 7 Roads, which could be a reference to basic something like Sorcerer of Dark Magic, or any of those where 2 of your main aces fuse as one. While 7 Roads Magician itself has a lot of different fusion monsters, 8 different ones by the way, although 7 of them were actually shown in the anime, the first one being the Paladin, which is the main first evolution that it got, with the Chariot being the other one for its own character. And we also got the dark version used by Ultis being the Magicians of Dark Sevens, which is also awesome with itself. And being a main character, definitely going to fuse with the other characters, like with Dragius, and one that has not been shown in the anime with the Dragius armor, Seven's Knight, a fusion between 2 pro tags, which is the first, even if it's the second ace with the main ace, along with a contact fusion, which is one of the other decks that has a contact fusion, but it doesn't focus on contact fusion. While also at the time technically the second deck with a maximum monster, and despite all that stuff, being a protagonist while also being a main villain deck still doesn't really make it to the list to me, because design wise isn't really that great. While awesome with its summoning methods mainly with fusion is also partnered up with most of the other characters, which is actually what drains it down for me. While yes, having other fusions of combined characters is always awesome, its own evolved forms is a bit lacking to me. And then we go to the Hollow Space deck, being one of those rare Cybers decks in Rush Duels. Main aces being a U-Drago, which is definitely a reference to the original Maximum U-Drago, which technically might be usable in the deck if you're only using U-Drago names. And being a U-Drago being 3-headed, of course this is going to evolve into something even further and stronger with more heads. Awesome its own way, but not as awesome as the other ones, so that's why it's still in honorable mentions. And then finally Dragius, which almost made it to the list actually, because Dragius has its own maximum monster that was never summoned in the anime, but it was a pro tag manga. And it's also a 3-headed dragon, which is awesome. It's also one of the other ones with its first fusion monster, which is also awesome, but also has other Geas forms or variations like Mira and Metal. Playstyle wise, it mainly just focuses on brutally attacking your opponent and nothing else actually. So despite the awesome design of dragons, and technically doesn't really have much of the other summoning methods, playstyle wise, it also only focuses on mainly attacking, hence why it's still on honorable mentions. And finally to number 1, it's Galactica. Oblivion is a main ace, and it's one of those main aces that it's a normal monster, also being the first Galaxy deck as well, representing the Light Galaxy, which also makes Transom usable in the deck, and technically making Ritual as part of the actual deck, since technically both archetypes are actually part of the same deck. Has its own maximum monster as well, which is definitely awesome, and definitely a lot of fusions, with the first one being Eternal Galactica. Then we got a dark version being Dark Oblivion, and the Lost Oblivion, which is the light one. But we can also go further by fusing it with the rival as Chaos Oblivion. Or go even further with a ultimate boss monster being Ultimate Trinity Stargazer, which is 3 main aces of the main characters fused as one, which is not too common in Yu-Gi-Oh! And also has an Anger Retrain form of Oblivion Arc, which is always awesome. And playstyle wise, a little unique too, because this is one of those rare decks that focuses on equip spells. Not too many Yu-Gi-Oh decks focuses on equipping weaponry, especially on a main deck boss monster that is normal. And adding its awesome design on top of it is kind of actually what makes this to my number 1, with all the awesome summoning methods and its unique playstyle of using equip spells, which not many Yu-Gi-Oh decks do. But let's also not forget one form that hasn't shown up in the anime, which is the God form, because God forms are awesome, which is another reason how it made it to the top. And so that's it for my rankings on my favorite Rush Duel decks. What do you guys think of it? And what would you put in your listing? Go ahead and say it down below because everyone can have their own personal opinion. These are just my personal favorites, and some of them could have made it to the list too. And I have to definitely say, Rush Duel definitely has some awesome concept and decks. And with Gold Rush already ended, it already kind of miss Rush Duels a bit, and some of its ideas were pretty awesome. Mainly on the maximum summon, and in a way fixing Ritual by having it be an extra deck mechanic that needs his main deck spell. But other than that, that's it for this, and see you next time.